Welcome to the Fulton Holland Educational Service Center on this beautiful Wednesday morning. This is our first session of bargaining, so we're really looking forward to maybe we get a deal today. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, so I'm going to have, do you have any proposals you'd like to pass along to us, or?
Well, if you have something, I'd like to hear what you have first. We've had a couple of issues, we've gone back and forth on the emails with, so
right.
Let's see first what you have pertaining to this one, and then we may caucus depending on what you have, if you have something.
We do. Mary can pass those out. We have two proposals. What we're proposing changes to is Article 18 in leaves and Article 20 in the salary, obviously. So we'll go through 18 first. So as the organization is getting bigger, we're noticing, we've noticed some changes that we need to address that probably weren't an issue when we were a smaller unit. Now that we're a larger unit, I think we need to put some stuff in writing so that everybody's aware of what our practices have been. So our first change is in 18.2, which is paid leave for personal reasons. You'll see in paragraph 1, we wanted to ask that, and as far as I know, this is current practice, that they expect that personal leave will be requested 48 hours in advance. Obviously, as it says, except in extenuating circumstances. So we'd like to put that language in the contract. We'd also like to add language 2. This is in paragraph 2. This is, from what I understand, this is in a general order somewhere. But we added some exception language that we use with the other units, particularly with CTA, so that if you're going to request personal leave, we're not going to approve it the day immediately preceding or following a holiday, the first 2 weeks of the school year, the last 2 weeks of the school year, and or the day immediately before or after the Thanksgiving break, winter break, and or spring break, and then there are exceptions. The exceptions are in case of an emergency, obviously, to observe a religious day of the employee's faith, to assist in moving a child, stepchild, or foster child in order to attend a college or university, or to attend the graduation of a member of the immediate family from a high school, college, or university. As used for graduations, immediate family means those residing in the employee's household, plus children, stepchildren, foster children, and your spouse. So that's language we'd like to provide in there. I understand part of that is in general orders about the restrictions, about when you can take the personal leave, the before and after holiday, that kind of language is in there, but we wanted to give some exceptions in there as well that we give other units.
What would be a hypothetical for extenuating circumstances in 1? And would you include 1 in the language of the contract?
I fell and broke my leg. My child broke their leg this morning. I got to take them to the ER. I think they might have hurt themselves. Obviously you could use sick leave for that, but it could be, I think of one that happened to myself. Our water heater, the pipe just blew off of it, and I got a flood in my house. I can't make it in today. And so those kind of issues, that really emergency circumstances. So it wouldn't be, I have a dentist appointment. It wouldn't be something like, I'm going to go see my orthopedist or my podiatrist or whatever it is, because those appointments can be scheduled at other times. This is one of those, it's an emergency. I have to be somewhere else, and it may not be for sick leave. It could be, like I just remember with mine was the hot water heater, the hose blew off of it, and suddenly you wake up and there's, half an inch of water in your house. So those are what I would consider extenuating circumstances.
All right, so you'd be comfortable putting a couple of examples in there?
Not really, because when I look at it, I don't want to limit it. If we put examples in there, I don't want that to become like the laundry list, because there are other things that we can't possibly think of. I mean, if you can think of one now, we can just throw it out there. I mean, I think...
It's not the laundry list. It puts the members on notice as to types of things that would be considered by the district to be extenuating circumstances.
Okay, we can, if that would make you more comfortable with that language, we can do it. If you have some ideas, we'd just be glad to hear them, so that we could add that.
I guess my question on that would be also, so the reason is it's more because we're going to becoming a bigger department and more of a traditional department, I guess, correct?
Correct.
So in a traditional department, you have different banks. You have a vacation bank, you have a sick bank, and you have a personal bank. When you take, and I think everywhere else, we also have the same issues of sick time. You really can't deny sick time. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so in this position now you put us in, and not just us, people are calling in sick if they're sick or not sick. I mean, you know what I'm saying? We don't know that. And this all, I think, revolves more around of getting paid for overtime. Because if I call in sick, we don't get paid for the overtime. You know, you had to do your 40 hours.
Correct.
Okay? When I do personal and vacation time, there's a separation there. It doesn't come off of your, I'm sorry, personal, but vacation. But it's all in the same bank, though.
Right.
We're all coming out of the same bank. You have a certain amount of sick time every year, vacation time every year, and personal days
Right,
every
and those
year.
are for 12-month positions. Right now,
Correct.
we don't have those positions. When we have 12-month positions, they do earn vacation. But when you don't work 12 months out of the year and you have 6 to 8 weeks off during the summertime, or the time off. I know we have a detective in our department now, and he's on a 216 contract, so his work days are different than mine. There are days that I would take off as a vacation. He already gets them as vacation because they're already not included in his work year.
And I understand that, but I'm saying, well, how do we change that then if somebody calls in 2 days before school starts on sick?
Well, if you feel, and this is the case in school board policy, that if you feel somebody is misusing sick leave, that can certainly be investigated.
No,
and someone
I
can be
understand that.
disciplined for
I'm
it.
just saying
And
that
we can also ask for a doctor's note if we feel like it's.
And I don't mean it like that, but I just don't want to see it. I guess I don't even know. It being separated, I mean, I think we're pretty good on that already, right? I mean, you guys see a problem with that?
With,
The way it's written now?
well, I think we'll caucus on it later on. I mean,
All right, so I see the first part of the proposal, a change, and then the next change I see is in bereavement, if I got it right?
Yes, and this is really to address something that we're going to be putting in the other contracts, or try to get in the other contracts as well, where we've given bereavement leave. And I don't know that this has been an issue in your unit at this point, but again, as your unit is expanding and we've got more officers working for us, we're trying to cut off some problems that we see that we've had in other units. All we're asking for in this case is that we can require proof of death within 30 days of requesting it. We have had a situation in which another unit that does get bereavement leave, their mother's now died twice. So it's one of those things that we want to make sure that no one is taking advantage of this benefit, and it's simply asking for some kind of proof. And it's not required.
Yeah,
it's
is
just
there an
made.
example of our membership
I
taking
do have
advantage of
examples
it?
in that one.
Is there, has one of our members ever taken advantage of this?
Not in your, like I said, not in your group. It's been in another group that now has bereavement leave. But like I said, your unit used to be much smaller. And as units get larger, we notice that the problems that we're seeing in other units, we see in yours as well. So this is just something we're going to be asking for in all of them. And quite honestly, I don't see what the big problem is. If you're taking bereavement leave for a real death in your family, this is not something that would be hard to get. It's not like we're asking for the moon. We're just asking for within 30 days to provide, and it's a may, because this is a situation kind of like the doctor's note. If we feel it's being abused, then we're going to ask for it. This is not a shall, it's may. So like with sick leave, we may ask for a doctor's note if we feel it's being abused. In this case, we may ask for this proof if we feel that there's a belief that the bereavement leave was taken and it was inappropriate.
is any other bargaining units being asked for that also? Or?
We haven't addressed it with SEIU and ASOP. They're the other two units, and we're going to be opening with them soon, and it will be in their proposals as well.
Okay, so we're the first.
You're the first because you just happen to be first to the table.
Understood.
But you're trying to, let's say, streamline it for all the units.
Correct. For all the units that get bereavement leave, we want to have these protections in place because, like I said, it's been a disciplinary case about somebody whose mother has now died multiple times.
Could be in the medical journals, too.
Oh, there was a real lengthy excuse and explanation that when we're off camera, I'll explain it to you. It's really interesting. It's a good story.
Any others? That's only that. Oh, no, there's more.
Okay.
Okay, the next change is on page 10. It's a new section 18.5. Again, this is because your unit has gotten larger. Where there's been some new trends that the command staff is seeing about attendance. And since you do have an attendance supplement so that people are rewarded for for attending, we also want to have some language in here that kind of shores up what we mean by excessive absenteeism. So, as it starts off, you guys are the security for the schools and for the district, and it's important that you're here. That's one of the reasons why we have the attendance incentive. We're not sure that it really incentivizes, given the number of people who actually get it, that it actually really does what we hoped it had done. But when an officer isn't here, it puts a burden on the department as a whole. It puts a burden on other officers. So we wanted to kind of put some language in here, and we've worked with SEIU to try and get something similar for some of their unit as well in a department where they have an attendance problem. We're talking about failure to report. So if you haven't, and this is a practice of the district, it's a 3-day no call, no show. We consider it job abandonment. That is the district's current practice. This just puts this in writing. And then we also have seen in other units, well, they no call, no show. We put them on the board for job abandonment. They show up the day of the board meeting and say, no, I haven't abandoned my job. It has to come off the board agenda, and then they end up being absent more outside of that. So in this case, what we wanted to do is if that happens and the person no call, no show for more than 3 days, at least and that's 3 consecutive days, not just 3 days, so 3 consecutive days, they're considered to voluntarily abandon their job. Their name will be submitted to the board. If they come in, they report to work prior to board approval, then they're going to be disciplined for failure to report to work, and then they're going to be denied opportunities for outside details and extra duty details unless otherwise approved by the chief of police for 6 months.
How does this square with the just cause provision?
Well, a person is either here or not here, right? So, and being disciplined doesn't mean that they're automatically going to be disciplined. They're subject to discipline.
So they get an investigation?
They get an investigation just like everybody else. It doesn't say they're automatically going to be disciplined. They're subject to the provisions of the and we cited the Article 29 in here, so those provisions still apply. They still get due process just like they would in anywhere else. But in this case, if they're going to be disciplined, the discipline will include that denial of those overtime opportunities. And that doesn't mean that if they're at a school site and they end up working over that they wouldn't get paid overtime. This is just those extra things that they can sign up for or volunteer for.
Yeah, but this says that if you're not there for 3 consecutive days, it will be assumed that you voluntarily abandon your job.
That's the district practice now.
But I would suggest, because we have a just cause for just discipline provision in this contract, like I do at almost 30 other agencies that we bargain heavily for, I would suggest that we get notices to the last residents.
We do that already.
I would suggest that it has the provision or potential policy that they could be violating that initiates an internal affairs investigation where the police officer's Bill of Rights applies, where they're noticed. If they don't show, they don't show. And if there's a finding without them, there's a finding. They also get an opportunity to have a pre-disciplinary proceeding. My goodness, if people here have passed the probationary stage and it's presumed that they have abandoned their job without being afforded a pre-disciplinary proceeding with an adverse employment action, that I look at that as heavily at odds with the just cause provision. I couldn't sign this as it's written unless we talk about it.
We can talk about it more, but I can tell you that's the practice of the district now. Across the board, we have just cause required in every single contract that we have. And this has been the practice. I've been in the district, it'll be 17 years in January, and we have been doing this for more than 17 years because this practice was in place when I got here. There are letters that are sent out. They are notified. And these are people who just never come in, never show up. They're offered all these opportunities. We provide them with, if you're having an issue, we provide them with the EAP packet or that link to that information. These are people who just do not come back to work, and they've abandoned their job. Now, the name is submitted to the board as a job abandonment. If the person shows up prior to board approval, that's when the investigation would occur. We would not investigate why you're not coming to work until you come back to work.
Well, what if
It's a policy violation.
What if the person's held up in a hospital, or they're, you know?
So you're just talking about an AWOL type of thing. A guy doesn't make no contact.
Exactly. No call, no show. This is AWOL. No, absolutely not. And there's
Only to
language,
say-
and as you go in here, there's language in here. If they are incapacitated, incapable of contacting the district, then they're not. This isn't going to happen.
I still think you need to afford, I respectfully think you need to send them the required notices, give them an opportunity.
We do that, but if they do not respond to the notices, because they're notified, you have been, and I can get my secretary to pull those letters and bring you samples, because we've been sending those out for at least 2 decades. They get a letter that says you have failed to call, you have failed to show up, we've deemed to abandon your job. You know, if you have these issues, they have all of that opportunity, but we're not going to conduct a full-fledged investigation because somebody is not calling in, not showing up. They've just disappeared.
Yeah, I guess where we're having issues with this is that we fall under a different category, not like the regular school board employees. We have our own policies and procedures to address things like this with IAs, with abandonment, AWOL. It's actually in our you know.
Well, just so you know, I don't create this language in a vacuum. I meet with the chiefs. I meet with the chief of police. I meet with his assistant chiefs to go over what they want. I don't decide what goes in the contract. They do. As for money, that's Mr. Burke. But for the language, any language changes we're suggesting are coming from the chief of police.
Okay.
All right, so walk us through the rest of
Okay.
the section.
I just want to clarify, because obviously, which we really appreciate, a lot of our members watch this, and I want to read this verbatim, what it says. In your proposed 18.5, subdivision A, the last 3 sentences.
Well, I would say that you have to read the whole thing, not just the last 3
but
sentences.
this is something that's complete, has nothing, I feel, to do with the above. If you're absent on a mandatory training day, comma, your work schedule days and/or duty hours may be adjusted to accommodate your attendance at the missed training on an alternate day. What does that have to do with the above?
Well, it has to do with failing to report. So it's my understanding that there are some officers who routinely call in on mandatory training days during the summer. Given the size of our unit now, from what I understand, there's going to be, it won't be one training, there'll be multiple trainings during the summer, different tracks of training, if you will,
Right.
because we can't accommodate everybody all at once. So if you're like, let's say, I don't know what they're what they're going to call it or how they're going to structure, but let's say you have, I think of it like summer school, you have, summer school A, summer school B, and summer school C, right? So if you're scheduled for summer school A, you may be scheduled to be off B and C, but you don't come during those trainings. You have, you're moving a child to college. You have a legitimate reason. I'm not saying that it's not
Like
legitimate.
I did, yes.
Okay, so you have some reason why you can't be there. What will happen is those days become your non-contract days, and then you'll be scheduled to take the training
Correct.
at another session.
Right.
That's all we're talking about there. So if a training is scheduled for a Friday and you can't make it, we're going to reschedule it for you on a day that would be normally a non-contract day for you. The day that you took off is now your non-contract day. You're not working anyway. That time will be slid into another appropriate place so you can make up that training.
But why was that the last 3 sentences of failure to report, which we were just discussing, that had to do with AWOL? This has nothing to do with
I can certainly
that.
put it in a different paragrh. I mean, it was just...
It needs a lot of, I'm sorry to be disrespectful, I'm not being disrespectful. This is also saying that basically it's going to be made up on an alternate day. It's not going to be on my day off. It's going to be on when I'm getting paid.
No, it would be on a day that you would normally be off, will become a paid day, and the day that you didn't show up
So then they're-
And this is only the mandatory training during the summer.
But it's very, the mandatory training for those of us who've been here for a while originally were firearms and defensive tactics and CPR. Now it's grown into this, whatever
Snowman
they feel it
Douglas,
to be.
yes.
No, even prior to that. But how is the department going to, when we know when we're off over the summertime, that if someone has to move their child to college, I'll use that example, and they miss a mandatory day, that they're going to be told that they have to work that Saturday when they got plans on that Saturday?
Well, because we have to make the training up. And what we're finding is that people want to make it up on a day when they're normally working, which means we have to then find somebody else to cover their normal shift at a school or to protect the students. So we feel that this is in the best interest of protecting our students, so that the training, if you miss a training, we're going to reschedule it so that you can get the training that you need or that's required by state statute. And if you want it in a separate paragraph, we can certainly do that. This was just a draft and a proposal.
So then therefore, so you're telling me that if the officer misses that mandatory training and they're going to do it on his or her day off, are they going to be ordered to work their day off, yes or no?
I would have to talk to the chief on that, what his
Because if
intent
it's yes,
is.
it's overtime, because we're running into this. That's why I don't have an issue personally with some of this, but I have a major issue with that because I don't like when I feel personally that's kind of slid in. And then when I ask questions, I can't get answers to them.
Okay,
Let's see the
well,
rest
hold
of
on
the
a
ar-
second.
let's see
Let
the
me
rest
just.
of the
No, it's
argument.
very important.
I think you're going down a slope, Mr. O'Sullivan, that I find really kind of offensive.
No, they're
That we're
very
not
simple
trying to slide
questions.
anything in. We've handed it to you. We've given you a written proposal so that you have it in writing. You can share this with your whole unit. We're not trying to hide anything with it. It just seemed to fit in that paragraph. I have no problem with adding a separate paragraph with dealing with attendance at mandatory trainings, but I'm being told by the chief of police that this is an issue, so we're trying to address it.
Right,
rather
and then
than
we represent our officers. I'm asking a simple question that needs to be clarified, so we can agree that
You've
this.
asked me one question, and I told you the chief of police is not here at this meeting. I can ask him and get back to you on it. I don't have the answer of whether he's going to order you to do something or not. That is entirely within his purview, not mine.
And so therefore, from a labor perspective, we can't even go forward on this until we get our questions answered on that
Well,
area.
that's why we're negotiating.
No, this
We
is
can
just for our
certainly
members.
we have more than one session. We can schedule another one. It's not a big deal. I don't know why this is becoming a personal issue.
No, it
but
has nothing with personal, because you know what's very interesting is our members watch this they pose me the following questions. You don't seem to get answers. We can't get answers from the other side. So that's why I'm being a little bit more assertive today, because if I am sitting here reading this for the first time and have questions, right, I should be able to get answers to them. It's very simple.
As we do with all of our other units, sir, if there is a question that someone at this table is not able to answer, like I said, this language comes at the request of the chief of police. He's not here. So I can certainly go find him, send him an email. I can ask him. I may not get the answer during this brief session we have today, but we've never not given you an answer. It may not just be immediate that we don't give you an answer.
Right, correct.
We always
Immediate.
go back and get you the answers if we don't have them at the table.
It would be very helpful so that our members can see it, that if we have a question like that cannot be answered here, that in the subsequent negotiation session, that the person be present to be able to answer it on video for our members.
Well, I'm not sure that that is always appropriate from the chief feels that it's not something that he wants to do, that he doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to put words in his mouth. He feels that because of the camaraderie he has with the officers, he finds this a little adversarial given how these sometimes end up. And I'm not putting words in his mouth, but this sometimes turns adversarial, and he doesn't want that relationship with the officer sitting across the table. So I can get the information from him, and we can get back to you on it.
I have a question. Other units or other, I guess, full-time, yearly-round employees, they have something called flex time, correct?
Not all,
Well,
no.
In our department, I think our administration has what they consider flex, where if they needed a day off, they just swap it out for a day that they had off, so this is pretty much that.
It's similar to that. I think we don't have anything in policy necessarily regarding flex time that I know of. I do know that trying to think of an example. School secretaries will do that they'll flex their time, that they know that they're going to be working an overtime situation at a open house or a curriculum night or something like that, or a choice showcase. So then the supervisor will set with them and go, okay, well, since you worked, 4 hours overtime on Friday, you just leave early. But they're hourly employees. They clock in, they clock out. And so that's usually when we do flex time, because we try to cut expenses so that they don't receive overtime. And so I don't know that I would call this flex, but it's the same kind of concept.
Yeah, I think our supervisors, captains and above, or lieutenants and above now, have flex. They've had flex time because I've seen on CAD they flexed.
Okay.
hours.
I guess
The
probably
only
you
other
want
thing,
some.
I'm sorry. The only other thing that I could see is that it's conflicting with another article that we have in our contract that's about the yearly calendar for offices has to be done in a timely manner, and it can't be changed unless last minute. So we're talking
Correct.
about conflict.
This is if you have a better solution, then I would be more than happy to hear it. But under the law for Stoneman Douglas, there's mandatory training, and part of your law officer's accreditation every year, there's trainings that you have to do, right? So what we're finding is there are some officers who, on a frequent basis,
Yeah, I
don't
understand
show
where
up.
you're
So
coming
we
from.
need to figure out a way so that they make up the time without it being at the expense of the safety of our students. So somebody else has to fill in for them from somewhere else.
I understand
Okay.
where you're
But
coming
but
from.
just clarifying that, we did, that was done during the summer on the days, on a Saturday. So that wasn't at the anything to do with the schools. It wasn't during
Right.
school hours. So that wasn't an issue this year when we made up the time that we didn't do during the summer.
Okay.
So that was never an issue whatsoever. You
Correct.
said we all had to come back in. I was one of them. I'll tell you, I wasn't here on that last day of training, so I had to come back in on a Saturday and do the training.
And me
Okay.
as well.
So that wasn't during, and it was prior to the school year.
Okay, well,
Alrighty.
like I said, I get the language from the chief, so we
Sure, I
will
get
certainly
it.
go back to him and
All
bring
right,
up your
maybe we
concerns.
can work on some sort of a counter on that.
Okay, that would be great.
All right, so you want to,
Oh,
so
just-
walk us through the rest.
Larry, just real quick on that. I think maybe we also need a little bit more what's mandatory training too.
Okay,
And what's not. Is it department mandatory training? Is it Stoneman Douglas mandatory training? Is it state required mandatory training?
I
'Cause
think the intent is all of that, but I will
It-
certainly get clarification
Yeah,
for you.
I mean, we can't just label everything mandatory training, you know what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying.
So and I think that would make things a whole lot easier, because I think this whole thing that we're doing right here has something to do with the attendance at training.
Part of that is yes, part of it is no, but like I said, when you have a smaller unit, you know every guy.
Sure.
You can talk to every guy. When it gets as big, we've almost doubled in size in 1 year. It becomes a little difficult to make sure that everybody's on the same page, every supervisor's on the same page. And like I said, some of this stuff, not necessarily its attendance, but some of the proposal we had previously, from my understanding, is in a general order somewhere. So this would just make it clearer for the employees, make it easier for them to find. It's in their contract, so.
And we agree with you, because now we agree that we're becoming more of a traditional department. That's why things that we're going to need to change for some of us too need to be more conform to a traditional department. Yeah, so I
Okay.
mean, we're right with you on that. So.
Okay. So going in, and obviously this is a proposal, so I don't want anybody to take this personal or get upset about it. This is a proposal, some ideas that we're floating around. So if you have suggestion changes or proposals of your own, we're more than happy to hear them. So we also have an issue about punctuality. This is if you're late 3 times in excess of 60 minutes, so it's over an hour, over a rolling 30-day calendar period, it would constitute grounds for disciplinary action. Again, it doesn't say you're going to be disciplined, but it constitutes grounds. That we're asking that if you're going to be late or absent, you call your supervisor at least 1 hour prior to the start of your shift time so that they can get someone out there to cover. Then paragraph C, or section C, is dealing with excessive absenteeism. And this is where we're going to do kind of lay this out. We've had this issue in other units as well of trying to figure out what does excessive absenteeism mean. It's not something we can put a number on, okay, so when you hit 5 days, it's excessive, right? This is more looking at patterns in practice. So if there are, if there's an incident that the chief feels that there's some kind of misuse of sick time, or if there's a historical pattern of leaves, and we have people who somehow manage to be sick on Fridays, every Friday that we get paid, they're sick, or every Monday after we get paid are sick, or they're sick right before and after a holiday every Christmas, the chief can then institute a review of that practice to see if there's anything to that. If you're using 5 sick leave within the preceding 180 work days, it's a red flag. That means that they're going to review it. It doesn't mean that they'll be disciplined for it. If there's legitimate reasons, obviously that wouldn't cause a problem. So an incident for purpose of this section is any absence of work for more than 60 minutes in any one day, excluding personal leave that was requested and approved in advance, that 48 hours in advance. So this isn't those days where you know you need to take off and you take that in advance. This is looking at people who are just, they're using their sick leave as they earn it, whether they're really sick or not. Any employee may be required to provide physician's documentation. We've used that in the past. Again, that's for questionable absences. It's not for everyone. And then if after review of the pattern or of an incident, if the explanation or documentation isn't satisfactory, then they're going to be disciplined pursuant to Article 29, which means all of that processes click into place to discipline anybody. The due process, everything else that you're used to, if there's discipline, this just says this is what's going to trigger it. And again, it's that if they're found to have done something that violates this policy, then they're not going to be eligible for those outside details for 6 months.
Do we have any incidents in our department of?
I haven't. That hasn't been shared with me. This was something that we talked about. So, if there were any incidents, I don't know that we'd share them with you because we wouldn't want to bring attention to any one officer.
No, I'm just wondering if that's one of the reasons that this came up. Usually everything has a reason behind it, and sometimes it's that we're seeing a pattern, not necessarily in your unit, but in others. And I know your unit is different. But when units get bigger, we notice smaller problems. Maybe it was one officer becomes 12 officers doing the same thing. And one officer doing it is not a big deal. 12 is a big deal. So there's the next change that really is 18 would become 18.6. The attendance supplement, it's just taking out that language where you talked about holding it in abeyance, because that would come out. And that's all the changes in 18 that we're proposing.
How does the rolling calendar work on the punctuality?
It's 30 days, so...
I have it at other agencies, and they end up counting the same discipline twice.
No, that's not the intent. So, like, if there was an issue...
No, it's not the intent, but it comes up all the time.
Well, we can certainly, if you have language that you'd like to propose to clarify that. The intent is, let's say you've missed October 1st was the last date, but then you missed like 3 days the second week in October. That rolling period would start with that first discipline. If you've already been disciplined, it's going to start after that discipline. It's not going to...
It's 30 days no matter how many days in that month.
Correct. So we didn't want to put it as a month because you get February or, and if you're disciplined at the beginning of February, you have 2 weeks where everything's good and then it starts back up again the end of February. That's when that 30 calendar days would start running again.
All right. I just want you to know that there are difficulties that come along with that.
And since you've seen them, if you have solutions, that would be fantastic.
Okay, what else you got?
Our next proposal is salary, Article 20. First change is on page 2. We noticed in the assignment pay, the sergeants have that $4,000 supplement that they get for being a sergeant. And I noticed in this round that there's a parenthetical there that says take-home vehicle. We're going to strike that. We'd like to strike that because not just sergeants have take-home vehicles anymore. We're trying to get them to all our officers. So it doesn't make sense to have it only for sergeants with a take-home vehicle. So we'd strike that language. That's in 20.3. Then in 20.5, that's what you've been waiting for, is our salary proposal. So starting January of 20, the minimum and the maximum would raise by 1%, and then everybody else would receive a 3% increase. The other changes are dealing with just date changes in 20.5. Then the next change is on page 6. It's in Article 20.11, the Sergeant Special Duty Assignment. As you can see in the proposal, we're taking out a lot of the requirements. We're finding that the Chief Kitzrow is finding that some of them are rather limiting on who he can give this special assignment to. So we've reduced on page 6, 20.11, the Sergeant Special Duty Assignment. Right now, you have to have at least 5 years of continuous law enforcement service with the district. We'd like to reduce that to 2 years internally, or at least 4 years of external law enforcement supervisory experience. And that's prior to the date of the application for the special duty assignment. We had taking the examination in there. As you'll see, we've taken that out entirely. There would not be an examination for sergeant any longer. So going to be, there would be only the oral interview. There would not be an examination required to get the special duty assignment. So you'll see, like, it's been taken out that they had to have at least 80% on the exam. All of that language would be stricken. So the language that remains is about filling the supplemental assignment, that it'll be advertised internally, and candidates that are meeting and maintaining the above listed qualifications at the time who wish to interview may make application to do so. And so the rest of the language that we've taken out in that sergeants is just dealing with that exam that will no longer be required. And that is the extent of our proposals. Do you have any questions about the Article 20?
You want to talk about the FTO contract while we're with this?
We can. We talked internally about that. I don't know where that language came from with all of those restrictions. I thought the language in the first two paragraphs was sufficient. We didn't need all those extra paragraphs. So it's my understanding that that has been revised. If it hasn't, let me know that they're no longer requiring. It's the same form application as before.
All right, so Lopez signed one and Lynch signed one, and I don't know which one they signed. Has it been revised, Chief?
Well, he'll have to check.
Okay.
It's my understanding, because we had a discussion about it, it was supposed to have been
Might
revised.
have been the intention, but the new.
They may not have asked you to re-sign it, so if that's something you want to do, we can certainly talk to them. If they've adjusted it as was requested that they do, they can give you a new copy of the list. I don't know why those other paragraphs were added. I think it was a best practices that was given at some kind of seminar. And I felt the paragraphs we had in there were sufficient to cover what they did. It just seemed to reiterate what was already in there.
All right, we're going to step out.
Okay.
And
do you have any suggested changes?
I have a thumbnail of some concerns, but I want to go over some of the things you presented first, and maybe I'll slide them to you next time with our written
Well, we'd
proposal.
kind of like to know at least what articles that you're intending to open.
So we're looking at work week and overtime, which is 17. We're looking at, it will probably come under Article 16, uniforms, vehicles, and equipment. And then the other item may or may not be a comp time item.
Is
But
that
those are the things we're looking at. I don't know what article it
Yeah,
comes
because
under.
we get salary plus 2, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, that may fall under wages.
Okay.
All right, we're going to step out.
Okay.
Thank you.